It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a royal title must be in want of a suitable bride, preferably one with impeccable bloodlines, connections to at least 3 dukedoms, and the ability to curtsy without toppling headfirst into the punch bowl. London's marriage mart operated with the precision of a military campaign, and no battalion was more fearsome than the mothers of eligible daughters during the season of 1817. His Royal Highness, Prince Philip Thornbury of Pembroke, a small but strategically important duchy connected to the crown, found the entire business exhausting. At 28, he had managed to dodge matrimonial intentions with the dexterity of a soldier avoiding cannon fire. This particular season, however, his mother had delivered an ultimatum wrapped in royal command: return with a bride or face the consequences of her selecting one for him. You understand, Philip, that the succession cannot wait forever upon your whims, the Duchess had said, adjusting her spectacles as though preparing to examine a particularly disappointing specimen. I have compiled a list of suitable candidates. Lady Harriet Fullerton heads it, naturally. Philip suppressed a groan. Lady Harriet was accomplished, beautiful, and possessed all the warmth and personality of a marble statue. Mother, I assure you, no, Philip. I will hear no more excuses. Your father indulged your academic pursuits and your peculiar interest in common folk songs and ancient melodies. Charming hobbies for a boy. Unsuitable distractions for a man who must secure his line. And so Prince Philip found himself in London, dutifully attending balls and making polite conversation with young ladies whose names and faces blurred together in a sea of white muslin and rehearsed compliments. The Thornbury townhouse on Grosvenor Square was, thankfully, a respite from the endless social engagements. The ancestral home had been in the family for generations, its impressive facade hiding an even more impressive collection of books, art, and musical instruments gathered by Philip's scholarly father. It was during one particularly tedious afternoon, after enduring Lady Harriet's rendition of a popular Italian aria that somehow managed to strip all emotion from the passionate piece, that Philip escaped to the gardens behind the townhouse. There, beyond the meticulously arranged roses and topiaries, stood a small cottage where the upper servants resided. The melody reached him first, haunting, ancient, and achingly familiar. Unlike Lady Harriet's technical performance, this voice carried genuine emotion, longing, nostalgia, and something indefinably sad. The Pembrian lullaby, one his nurse had sung to him as a child, flowed through the garden air like a forgotten memory. Drawn by curiosity, Philip followed the sound to an open window of the cottage. Inside, a young woman stood with her back to him, sweeping the floor while she sang. Her dark chestnut hair was neatly tucked beneath a cap, her plain grey dress marking her as one of the housemaids. Yet she sang the complex melody perfectly, her voice pure and untrained but somehow all the more affecting for its natural quality. The song spoke of the ancient hills of Pembroke, of mothers waiting for sons to return from sea, of a love that persists beyond death. It was a song known only to those from his homeland, a cultural treasure rarely heard outside the Dutch's borders. As she reached the final refrain, Philip inadvertently stepped closer, snapping a twig beneath his boot. The maid whirled around, her song cutting off abruptly as she dropped into a deep curtsy. Your Highness! Forgive me, I didn't realize, please. Philip raised a hand. Don't stop on my account. Where did you learn that song? Still curtsying, the young woman kept her eyes lowered. My mother taught it to me, Your Highness. She was from Pembroke. Philip studied her with new interest. Rise, please. What is your name? Charlotte Newbury, Your Highness. I'm newly employed in your household. Her voice remained respectful, but as she straightened, Philip noted she met his eyes directly, unusual for a servant addressing royalty. Her eyes were a remarkable shade of amber, framed by dark lashes. Miss Newbury, your rendition was quite moving. Far more authentic than what I typically hear in London drawing rooms. A flush colored her cheeks. Thank you, Your Highness, though I'm certain you've heard much finer voices. Technical proficiency and emotional truth are different matters entirely. Philip found himself smiling. Tell me, how did your mother come to leave Pembroke? A shadow crossed Charlotte's face. She married an English merchant, Your Highness. My father travelled to Pembroke on business and returned with a bride. They were very happy until... She hesitated. Until they weren't. After my father's death, we fell on difficult times. The story was sadly common: a tradesman's widow left with little provision, a daughter forced into service. Yet something about Charlotte Newbury intrigued him beyond her connection to his homeland. Would you sing the second verse again? Few remember it correctly. Surprise flickered across her features, but Charlotte obliged, her voice gaining confidence as she continued. Philip closed his eyes, transported briefly to his childhood nursery, to his father's study where the Duke had meticulously transcribed folk songs to preserve them for future generations. When she finished, Philip opened his eyes to find Charlotte watching him curiously. "Your Highness seems to know the song well. It was my father's favourite. He believed our ancient songs carried the soul of Pembroke within their melodies." Philip seldom spoke of his father, particularly to strangers, yet something about this maid's direct gaze encouraged candour. "The Duke was known for his scholarship even in our village," Charlotte said. "My mother spoke highly of his efforts to preserve our traditions." Their conversation was interrupted by the housekeeper's voice calling for Charlotte. "I must go," she said, dropping another curtsy. "Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness." As she hurried away, Philip realized he had spent 15 minutes in conversation with a housemaid, and found it more engaging than hours of society small talk. How very peculiar. The incident might have ended there, relegated to a pleasant memory, had Philip not found himself unable to sleep that night. The lullaby played in his mind, along with the image of amber eyes and a forthright gaze. At 3 in the morning, he gave up on slumber and made his way to the library, intending to locate his father's collection of transcribed folk songs. The last person he expected to find was Charlotte Newbury, standing on a library ladder with a duster in hand. "Miss Newbury." Charlotte startled so violently she nearly fell from her perch. Philip moved quickly, steadying the ladder with one hand. "Your Highness, I apologize for my presence. I couldn't sleep and thought I might make myself useful. Do you often dust bookshelves in the middle of the night?" A hint of a smile touched her lips. "Only when plagued by restlessness, Your Highness. A condition we apparently share." Philip stepped back as she descended the ladder. "Though I confess, I seek books rather than dust. May I help you find something specific?" "My father's collection of Pembrian folk songs. Leather-bound volumes with his notes." Charlotte's eyes brightened with recognition. "The volumes with green binding and gold lettering?" "Third shelf from the top, western wall." Philip raised an eyebrow. "You're remarkably familiar with the library's organization for someone recently employed." A blush colored her cheeks. "Books have always been a weakness of mine. When dusting, I notice things." "You mean you read them?" "Only when I'm certain I won't be caught," she admitted, then clapped a hand over her mouth. "I shouldn't have said that." Philip laughed, a genuine laugh he rarely indulged in during society functions. "Your secret is safe with me, Miss Newbury. In fact..." He moved to the shelf she had indicated and located the volumes. "Perhaps you'd join me? These songs are your heritage as well." Charlotte's expression shifted from surprise to hesitation. "It wouldn't be proper, Your Highness. I am merely consulting a subject matter expert on Pembrian folk traditions," Philip replied with mock seriousness. "Most scholarly." That earned him another smile, slightly less guarded. "If Your Highness insists." And so began the strangest midnight meeting, a prince and a housemaid poring over folk songs by candlelight, their heads bent close together as Charlotte identified variations in lyrics from her village. "This line here," she pointed to a passage, careful not to touch the page directly. "We sang silver waters, not shining waters." Regional differences, Philip nodded. Father noted similar variations between coastal and hill communities. They spoke for over an hour, Charlotte gradually relaxing enough to share memories of her mother singing these songs while preparing meals or mending clothes. Philip, in turn, described his father's passion for preservation. He believed music carried history more faithfully than written accounts, Philip explained. that the emotions of our ancestors lived on in melodies passed from mother to child. Your father was wise, Charlotte said softly. When I sing these songs, I feel connected to my mother, to her mother before her. As though they stand beside me. The intimacy of the moment struck Philip suddenly, the late hour, the shared confidences, the impropriety of their entire conversation. He cleared his throat and closed the volume. It's quite late. You should rest. Charlotte immediately reverted to her role as servant, rising and curtsying. Of course, Your Highness. Thank you for your indulgence. As she turned to leave, Philip found himself reluctant to end their conversation. Miss Newbury? Perhaps tomorrow night, if you find yourself similarly afflicted with sleeplessness. She paused at the door. The library is an excellent cure for restlessness, Your Highness. Indeed it is. Philip watched her go, aware that he had just initiated something unwise, improper, and potentially scandalous. Yet as he returned to his bedchamber, he found himself looking forward to the next evening with an anticipation he hadn't felt in years. Their clandestine meetings continued over the following week. Each night, Philip would find Charlotte already in the library, sometimes reading, sometimes organizing books. Their conversations ranged beyond folk songs to literature, history, and carefully veiled personal confidences. Philip learned that Charlotte had received an unusual education for a tradesman's daughter, thanks to her father's belief in female intellect. In turn, he shared his frustrations with court politics and his mother's matrimonial ambitions. Lady Harriet is accomplished, beautiful, and would make a most suitable princess, Charlotte observed after Philip described his mother's preferred candidate. She would indeed, Philip agreed. And about as engaging as a particularly dull sermon. Charlotte tried to suppress her laugh. Your Highness shouldn't say such things. To you, I find I can say many things I typically keep to myself. The admission slipped out before he could reconsider it. Charlotte's smile faded. You should be careful, Your Highness. Servants hear everything, and gossip travels quickly. Are you warning me that you might betray my confidences, Miss Newbury? Never, she said with such earnestness that Philip felt a strange tightening in his chest. But others might notice our conversations. She was right, of course. Their midnight meetings, innocent as they were in content, would appear scandalous to outside observers. Yet Philip found himself unwilling to end them. Perhaps we should meet elsewhere, he suggested. Somewhere less conspicuous. There is nowhere appropriate for a prince and a housemaid to meet privately, Charlotte replied practically. What about publicly? The idea formed as he spoke it. Tomorrow is my weekly visit to the British Museum. You could accompany Mrs. Winters as an additional lady's maid. Charlotte's eyes widened. That would be highly irregular. Not at all. Mrs. Winters often complains about navigating crowds with her arthritis. Having an additional pair of hands would be sensible, not suspicious. And so the following afternoon, Charlotte found herself trailing behind Philip's aunt, the formidable Mrs. Winters, as they toured the museum's newest exhibition of Greek antiquities. Philip walked alongside his aunt, occasionally glancing back to where Charlotte followed at a respectful distance. The opportunity to speak came when Mrs. Winters encountered Lady Pemberton, an old friend, and became engrossed in conversation about the latest on it. Philip casually moved toward a nearby display, motioning subtly for Charlotte to approach. What do you think of the exhibition, Miss Newbury? He asked quietly as she came to stand beside him, maintaining a proper distance. It's magnificent, Your Highness, she replied, her eyes bright with enthusiasm despite her subdued demeanor. I've read about these sculptures but never imagined seeing them. You've studied Greek art. A shadow crossed her face. My father had several books on the subject. Before we had to sell them. Philip felt a pang of sympathy, imagining this bright, curious woman forced to part with beloved books out of necessity. Which piece interests you most? Charlotte hesitated, then gestured toward a small bronze statue. That one. The pose suggests movement, as though she might step off her pedestal at any moment. Philip studied the piece with new appreciation. I hadn't noticed that quality before. You have an artist's eye, Miss Newbury. Merely an appreciative one, Your Highness. They continued this way through the exhibition, brief conversations when Mrs. Winters was distracted, Charlotte offering observations that repeatedly surprised Philip with their insight and originality. By the time they returned to the carriage, Philip found himself seeing the familiar exhibitions through new eyes. As the weeks progressed, Philip invented increasingly creative reasons for Charlotte's presence. Additional help was needed serving tea when important visitors came, Mrs. Winters required assistance sorting her correspondence, the housekeeper needed someone to accompany her on errands. The household staff exchanged knowing looks, clearly assuming the prince's interest was of a dishonorable nature, but none dared question his decisions. Philip told himself their friendship was harmless. Charlotte was intelligent, well-spoken despite her circumstances, and provided conversation he found genuinely stimulating. If he occasionally caught himself watching the way sunlight caught the auburn highlights in her hair, or noticing how her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when she laughed, well, that was merely aesthetic appreciation. The illusion of harmlessness shattered one evening when Philip returned from a particularly tedious ball where Lady Harriet had made her intentions painfully clear. He found Charlotte in the library, asleep in a window seat, an open book on her lap. Moonlight silvered her features, and without the servant's cap, her hair fell in loose waves around her face. The sight struck him with unexpected force. She looked peaceful, vulnerable, and utterly beautiful. More disturbingly, Philip realized he wanted nothing more than to sit beside her, to wake her gently and continue their conversation from the previous evening about Pembrian legends. Instead, he retreated silently, troubled by his reaction. This was dangerous territory, not because Charlotte was a servant, but because Philip was beginning to suspect his interest was far from casual. The following morning, Philip informed his household staff that he would be traveling to his country estate for several days. He didn't say goodbye to Charlotte. The countryside offered little relief. Philip rode for hours, attended to estate business, and tried desperately not to think about amber eyes and insightful observations. When he returned to London a week later, he resolved to maintain appropriate distance from Miss Charlotte Newbury. This resolution lasted precisely 3 hours, until he overheard his valet mentioning that the housemaid with the pretty voice had left their employment. Left? Philip interrupted, forgetting propriety entirely. Miss Newbury is gone. The valet, accustomed to his master's usually reserved demeanor, blinked in surprise. Yes, Your Highness. Mrs. Graves received a letter of resignation 2 days ago. Something about a position as a companion to an elderly lady. Philip dismissed the valet and sat heavily on his bed. Charlotte was gone. He should be relieved, the temptation removed, his foolish infatuation given no opportunity to develop further. Instead, he felt a hollow sensation in his chest, as though something essential had been removed. That night, unable to sleep, Philip went to the library. It felt emptier somehow. On impulse, he moved to the shelf where they had examined his father's folksong collection. As he pulled out the familiar volume, a folded paper fell from between the pages. The letter was unsigned but unmistakably from Charlotte, Your Highness, forgiveness is easier to request than permission, so I hope you will pardon my presumption in leaving this note. By the time you read these words, I will have left your household. Our conversations have been the greatest privilege of my life, but we both know they cannot continue. You have duties to your position and your duchy. I have no wish to complicate those obligations or to become the subject of inevitable gossip. I have accepted a position as companion to Mrs. Eleanor Trent in Hampstead. She is elderly and kind, and the position offers more dignity than my current circumstances. Please know that I will treasure our discussions about Pembrian songs, literature, and art. You helped me remember parts of myself I feared were lost forever. I wish you happiness in all your endeavors, including finding a princess worthy of you. Lady Harriet may yet surprise you with hidden depths. With deepest respect and gratitude. A fellow admirer of Silver Waters. Philip read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in his waistcoat pocket. Charlotte had slipped away like a character from one of the novels they had discussed, noble sacrifice, quiet dignity, and all the other literary tropes that, in real life, left him feeling hollow and bereft. The following day, Philip found himself directing his carriage to Hampstead. He had no plan, no reasonable explanation for his actions, only the certainty that he couldn't leave matters as they stood. The address had required some investigation. A discreet inquiry to Mrs. Graves revealed that Charlotte had provided a forwarding address for her final wages. Mrs. Trent's modest but respectable home sat on a quiet street lined with plane trees. Philip hesitated before approaching the door. What exactly did he intend to say? That he missed their conversations? That he objected to her making decisions about their friendship without consulting him? Neither approach seemed promising. Before he could decide, the front door opened, and Charlotte emerged wearing a simple blue walking dress, not servant's attire, but the garb of a genteel companion. She carried a basket and was clearly embarking on an errand. When she saw Philip standing by his carriage, she froze. "Your Highness," she finally managed, dropping into a curtsy. "This is unexpected." "Indeed. I find myself acting in ways that surprise even me," Philip admitted, approaching her. "You left without saying goodbye." "I left a letter," Charlotte countered, clutching her basket tighter. "A letter explaining why you were removing yourself from my life for my own good." Philip couldn't keep the edge from his voice. "Rather presumptuous, don't you think?" Charlotte lifted her chin. "I made a practical decision based on our respective positions in society. Without consulting me." "Was there something to consult about, Your Highness?" Charlotte asked softly. "We shared conversations about books and music." "Enjoyable, certainly, but hardly essential." The word stung more than Philip expected. "Is that all they were to you?" Something flickered in Charlotte's eyes, pain, perhaps, or regret. "What they were to me is irrelevant. What matters is what they might have become, and the damage that would cause to your standing. So you appointed yourself guardian of my reputation." "Someone had to exercise good judgment," Charlotte replied with a hint of her usual directness. "Your Highness, please. This conversation serves no purpose. You have responsibilities to Pembroke, to your family. I have found a respectable position with a kind employer. Let us part as friendly acquaintances with fond memories." Philip studied her face, noting the determination in her expression and something else, a vulnerability she was trying desperately to hide. "I've been informed that my judgment regarding my own happiness is severely lacking," he said finally. "Perhaps you'd care to join me for a walk so that I might persuade you otherwise." Charlotte hesitated, glancing back at the house. "Mrs. Trent is napping. I was only going to the circulating library." She bit her lip. One turn around the square, perhaps. For closure. They walked in silence at first, maintaining a respectable distance between them. Several neighbors nodded politely at Charlotte, clearly already familiar with Mrs. Trent's new companion. "Do you like your new position?" Philip asked finally. "Very much. Mrs. Trent is interested in poetry and has an excellent collection. She encourages me to read to her daily and discuss the works." "That sounds ideal for you." Charlotte smiled slightly. "It is a blessing I never expected. After my father died and we lost everything, I thought books and learning were luxuries I would never again enjoy. Yet here you are, discussing poetry with elderly ladies and walking with princes." Philip paused. "Charlotte, I need to ask you something." She looked up at the use of her given name. "Yes? Did you leave solely out of concern for propriety, or was there another reason?" Charlotte slowed her pace, considering her answer carefully. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She sighed, her composure slipping slightly. "Very well. I left because I found myself—" She hesitated, choosing her words with care. "I found myself experiencing feelings that were inappropriate given our respective stations. Feelings that made it difficult to maintain proper boundaries." Philip felt his heart quicken. "What sort of feelings?" Charlotte stopped walking entirely, turning to face him with remarkable composure despite the color in her cheeks. "The sort that a housemaid has no business harboring for a prince." the sort that lead to heartbreak and ruined reputations. I chose to remove myself from temptation before I compromised my dignity or your position." The honesty of her answer, delivered without coyness or manipulation, struck Philip deeply. "And if I told you those feelings were reciprocated?" "I would say that changes nothing," Charlotte replied, though her voice wavered slightly. "Feelings, however genuine, cannot alter the realities of our situations." "Cannot they?" Philip stepped closer. "Charlotte, when I'm with you, I feel more myself than I have in years. You challenge my thinking, you make me laugh, you understand parts of me and my love of Pembrian music, my father's legacy, that no one else has bothered to know. Is that worth nothing?" "It's worth everything," Charlotte whispered. "Which is why I had to leave before I convinced myself it could be more than friendship." "But what if it could?" The question hung between them, dangerous and tempting. Charlotte shook her head. "Your Highness, Philip," he corrected. "My name is Philip." "Philip," she conceded, the name sounding intimate on her lips. "You require a suitable wife, a woman of rank and breeding who understands court politics and can further Pembroke's interests. I am the daughter of a failed merchant with nothing to offer but conversation and a few shared folk songs." "You undervalue yourself considerably," Philip countered. "You possess intelligence, compassion, integrity, and a genuine love for the culture and traditions of Pembroke. Those qualities matter far more to me than bloodlines or political connections." Charlotte's eyes widened. "You cannot mean—" "I'm not entirely certain what I mean," Philip admitted with a rueful smile. "I know only that since you left, I've felt your absence like a physical ache. That I would rather spend an hour in conversation with you than a lifetime with someone chosen for political expedience." "You speak of impossible things," Charlotte said softly. "Your mother would never approve. Society would be scandalized. Pembroke needs alliances that I cannot provide. Pembroke needs a princess who loves its culture, understands its people, and can help preserve its heritage," Philip argued. "Someone exactly like you." Charlotte looked away. "Please don't say such things unless you truly mean them." "My heart couldn't bear it." Philip reached for her hand. "Propriety be damned. Charlotte, I'm not proposing marriage on a public street after weeks of clandestine conversations. I'm asking for a chance to explore what exists between us properly, openly, without you disappearing because you decided what's best for me." Hope and fear warred in Charlotte's expression. "How would that even work?" "Begin by accepting my invitation to attend a musicale at my home next week, not as a servant or as Mrs. Trent's companion, but as my personal guest," Philip suggested. "Let us see how society responds to Charlotte Newbury, daughter of a Pembrian mother, with connections to our homeland and an interest in preserving its cultural heritage. And when they discover I was previously employed as your housemaid, then they will admire your remarkable rise in circumstances, attribute it to your exceptional qualities, and gossip endlessly about the romance of it all," Philip replied with a hint of his dry humor. "London adores nothing more than a Cinderella story, particularly one involving minor royalty from a picturesque duchy." Despite herself, Charlotte laughed. "You make it sound almost plausible." "Because it is." Philip squeezed her hand gently. "Say yes, Charlotte. Not to forever, not yet, but to possibility." The amber eyes that had first captured his attention searched his face, looking for any sign of insincerity or fleeting fancy. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her, for she nodded slowly. "Yes," she said simply. "To possibility." The following weeks proved Philip's predictions both right and wrong. Society did indeed find the notion of the Prince of Pembroke's interest in a merchant's daughter with Pembrian heritage romantically appealing, but only after his mother, the Duchess, had nearly suffered an apoplexy at the news. A housemaid, she had demanded when Philip informed her of his intention to introduce Charlotte to society. "Have you taken complete leave of your senses?" "Former housemaid," Philip corrected mildly. "Currently a companion to a respectable widow, and daughter of a Pembrian mother who knew the folk songs father spent his life preserving." The Duchess narrowed her eyes. "Is that supposed to make this madness acceptable?" "It makes it meaningful," Philip replied. She understands Pembroke's culture in ways Lady Harriet never could. She values what father valued. Your father's folk song obsession is hardly a basis for marriage. Philip smiled. Who said anything about marriage? The Duchess was not fooled. Don't play coy with me, Philip. I know you too well. This girl has caught your interest in a way no suitable candidate ever has. I can see it in your expression. Then perhaps you should meet her before dismissing the possibility entirely, Philip suggested. Judge her character for yourself. To the Duchess's considerable surprise, Charlotte Newbury proved impossible to dislike. Her manners were impeccable, her conversation intelligent without being pretentious, and her genuine affection for Pembroke's traditions evident in every mention of the duchy. Most disarming of all was her complete lack of calculation. Charlotte neither flaunted her connection to the prince nor attempted to curry favor with the Duchess. She's entirely unsuitable, of course, the Duchess informed Philip after their first meeting. But I can see why you find her refreshing. It was as close to approval as Philip could hope for at this stage. Charlotte's debut at the Thornbury Musicale caused predictable ripples of curiosity and speculation. Her simple but elegant gown, a gift from Mrs. Trent, who had enthusiastically supported what she called a romance straight from a novel, marked her as neither wealthy nor impoverished. Her manners were faultless, her conversation engaging without overstepping, and most importantly, when prevailed upon to sing, her rendition of a Pembrian folk song captivated the audience. Who is she? Became the whispered question throughout the room, with answers varying from the distant relation of the Pembrian royal family to the music teacher discovered by the prince during his cultural preservation efforts. No one guessed her previous employment, and Philip made no effort to correct the more flattering assumptions. Lady Harriet observed these developments with cool assessment rather than jealousy. At the next ball, she approached Philip with her usual composure. I believe congratulations are in order, Your Highness, she said, her voice revealing nothing of her thoughts. Miss Newbury seems to have captured your interest quite thoroughly. She has indeed, Philip acknowledged. I hope this doesn't cause you distress, Lady Harriet. Lady Harriet's lips curved in what might almost be called a smile. On the contrary. I find myself relieved. We would have made a sensible match, but I think we both know it would have been a rather tedious one. Philip blinked in surprise. I had no idea you felt that way. Of course not. I was raised to appear perfectly satisfied with any advantageous arrangement. She glanced across the room to where a young diplomat was conversing with several gentlemen. Between ourselves, I have my own preference, though father considers him insufficiently established. Philip followed her gaze. Mr. Reynolds is a man of considerable talent. The Foreign Office speaks highly of his diplomatic abilities. Does it indeed? Lady Harriet's composure slipped just enough to reveal genuine interest. How fascinating. I should be happy to mention as much to your father, Philip offered. Perhaps at Lord and Lady Pembroke's dinner next week. A genuine smile transformed Lady Harriet's usually reserved countenance. That would be most kind, Your Highness. As Lady Harriet departed, Charlotte approached, having observed the exchange from a distance. Making amends, she asked softly. Creating possibilities, Philip corrected, offering his arm. It seems Lady Harriet and I share a preference for partners who engage our intellect rather than merely advancing our social position. Charlotte accepted his arm, allowing him to guide her toward the terrace doors. She seemed almost human when smiling. I never would have guessed. People often surprise us when given the chance, Philip remarked as they stepped into the cool evening air. The terrace was sparsely populated, just enough chaperonage to maintain propriety while allowing for relatively private conversation. Like a prince who prefers a housemaid's company to that of suitable candidates. Charlotte teased gently. Former housemaid, Philip corrected with mock severity. Currently the toast of the season and advisor to the Pembrian Cultural Preservation Society. The last was a recent development. Philip had established the society as a way to formalize his father's work and, not incidentally, to provide Charlotte with a respectable position and income independent of her role as companion to Mrs. Trent. Her knowledge of regional variations in folk traditions had proven invaluable, earning genuine respect from the scholars and musicians involved in the project. A very grand title for someone who simply remembers her mother's songs, Charlotte observed. Those memories are precisely what make you invaluable. Philip led her to a quiet corner of the terrace where a stone bench offered a view of the garden below. Charlotte, we've known each other for nearly 6 months now. Has it been so long? She mused. From housemaid to cultural advisor in half a year. What a strange journey. One I hope will continue, Philip said, his tone shifting to something more serious. These past months have confirmed what I suspected from our earliest conversations. You are unlike anyone I've ever known, intelligent, principled, and genuinely concerned with Pembroke's heritage in a way no political alliance could ensure. Charlotte's eyes widened as Philip reached for her hand. Philip, are you? I am, he confirmed, dropping to one knee despite the inappropriateness of such a public proposal. Charlotte Newbury, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife and Princess of Pembroke? Not for political advantage or social advancement, but because I love you and believe we could build something remarkable together. Tears gathered in Charlotte's amber eyes. The Duchess will be furious. The Duchess has already informed me that if I must marry someone unsuitable, I could hardly choose better than a woman who can correctly sing all 12 verses of The Shepherd's Lament, Philip replied with a smile. I believe that's as close to a blessing as we're likely to get. Charlotte laughed through her tears. In that case, yes. Yes, I will marry you, Philip Thornberry, though I suspect we're causing a scandal at this very moment. As if on cue, a gasp from the doorway announced that their private moment had been observed by at least one member of the ton. Philip rose, still holding Charlotte's hand. Let them talk, he said softly. By tomorrow, all of London will know that the Prince of Pembroke has found his princess, not in the grand ballrooms or political salons, but in a garden cottage where an ancient lullaby reminded him of home. How poetic, Charlotte teased, though her eyes shone with happiness. Perhaps we should commission a folk song about it for future generations. I have a better idea, Philip countered, drawing her closer. Let's create a life worth singing about. And as the whispers and exclamations spread through the ballroom behind them, the Prince of Pembroke kissed his future princess beneath the stars, while somewhere in the back of his mind, an ancient Pembrian lullaby played on, the melody that had first led his heart to recognize its match.